My Face is Black is True, Callie House and the Struggle for Ex-Slave Reparations by Mary Frances Berry. Restarting on the end of page 61. African Americans had long been in the habit of forming mutual assistance associations, providing help when government refused to help. For African Americans, such mediating institutions historically provided the only available social assistance. Government provisions on social services to the African American community is a relatively recent development. In 1787, in Philadelphia, blacks led by Richard Allen and Absalom Jones withdrew as a body from the prejudiced whites of St. George's Church and formed the Free African Society, the first African American mutual aid society. The members pledged to help one another in sickness and death and to provide for widows and children of the deceased. They also purchased a plot to use as a burial ground. Mutual aid societies, often connected with a church, spread rapidly in northern urban communities and among free Negroes in the New Orleans, Charleston, and other southern cities. In this period, long before Social Security Act of 1935, the societies aided the elderly or disabled and provided a decent burial for the impecunious. With emancipation, the concept of the benevolent association grew rapidly until it was employed by Miss House and the association. It was one component of the broad effort of community care among African Americans, which included secret societies, home for children, homes for children, old age homes, and a flexible family system for individuals throughout the life cycle. At the end of the 19th century, when the Ex-Slave Association began, a freedman or a woman emancipated at age 30 would be 67. Among the first generation of African Americans to enjoy freedom, large numbers were in this in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and unable to work at manual labor because they were suffering from a variety of ills, some stemming from hardships enduring during slavery. The rapidly aging members overwhelmed local benevolent societies. The crisis underscored the need for both parties of the ex-slave association's agenda or of mutual aid and pensions. In 1898, when the ex-slave association sought its charities, Nashville already had a number of benevolent institutions. The 1895 smallpox epidemic and the continuing admonitions of the public health officer caused the White Ladies Relief Society to increase help to poor whites and to challenge Black leaders to do the same for African Americans. 30 leading African American women formed the Colored Relief Society for this purpose. Other relief organizations included the Nashville Provident Association, founded in 1865 to give firewood and soup to needy freedmen, still operated. Nashville's African American churches, like those elsewhere, offered benevolence auxiliaries. The association's mutual aid filled a crucial gap in the desperate and generally underfinanced services for an aging, ill population. Pardon me, guys. For an aging, ill population suffering from poverty, bad diet, injuries from abuse during slavery, and hard work since. Many ex-slaves over the age of 70 had a difficult time making their battered bodies continue to work at the hard labor jobs available to them. Moreover, the poverty of the first freedmen generation of African Americans meant they could not sustain both their older relatives and their own families. Nashville's off African better off African Americans put some resources into helping the poor, but they showed more concern for civil rights and opportunities than for addressing poverty. As Jim Crow and disenfranchisement became law and the lynching of African Americans became common across the South, they also took their role in Nashville, indelibly etched in the minds of local ex-slaves, was the 1892 lynching of Elf Gizzard, who had been accused of raping a white woman. On April 30th, while the city was still in the grips of the 17-foot March snowstorm, the largest in history, the 17-foot March snowstorm, the largest in history. Wow. Gizzard was hanged by a mob right downtown at 2:40 p.m. on Woodlawn Street Bridge. Most of Nashville's frustrated African American leadership ignored pension seeking to spend their energy and political capital on other concerns where they believed they could make a difference. For example, the year before House and others met in the city to promote reparations, the elites worked hard to gain participation in the Centennial Exposition of 1897, held to mark Tennessee's 100th birthday. Preoccupied with their own image as an educated group, the elites thought it valuable to join the exposition, even though they would have to accept segregation. Northern middle class African Americans, far from the Jim Crow environment, objected to the strategy, earning the resentment of their Nashville counterparts. On February 27, 1897, the Nashville American newspaper criticized the only African American in the Massachusetts legislature for complaining that public funds should not be used to pay the expenses of Massachusetts officials visiting the Tennessee Fair because of its segregation in a period when House and most other African Americans lived in rental housing without light or heat except for a fireplace and worked at low wage, and worked at low wage, labor intensive jobs with which they could barely make ends meet. The business and professional leadership fought for inclusion in the exposition and boasted that they achieved a Negro Day at the fair. Huh. In the end, the emphasis on culture, sketches, oil paintings, and drawings, musical compositions played daily by a pianist, and carvings by Negro sculptor G.R. Devens of horns and walking canes engraved with pictures of Civil War generals contrasted sharply with the real life social and economic problems of poor African Americans. When the exposition was over, their problems remained. But it was in 1895 in Atlanta, on precisely such an occasion, a proud cultural display that Booker T. Washington gave his racial accommodation speech. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the five fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress, he continued. For those of my race who depend upon bettering their condition in a foreign land or underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the Southern white man, I would say cast down your buckets where you are. His widely reported Atlanta exposition speech essentially amounted to telling African Americans to stay in the South, work hard, and accept segregation to show that they deserved citizenship rights someday. Washington's speech made him white Americans' favorite race leader and gave him control of African Americans' access to money and power. In Nashville, the Tennessee Exposition officials followed the example set in Atlanta to establish a segregated Negro department. At the beginning, they appointed a committee chaired by the city's most prominent African American Republican leader, James Napier, a former member of the city council who held various patron, patronage posts and saw to it that his friends did so as well. As chief of the Negro Department, Napier's commitment included 15 of the most prominent African Americans. With this nod to Napier by the state leading white businessman, Nashville's African American leadership dis- determined to show its agreement with the philosophy of Booker T. Washington. It publicly accepted segregation as a road to equality and applauded the section of Washington's as Speaker. It also seized the opportunity to display the progress African Americans had made since emancipation. When Napier was later forced to resign because of ill health, he publicly underscored the value of this opportunity to the community. His resignation letter pointed out that since emancipation, intelligent blacks had rapidly increased in number, and the Negro Exhibition Hall would prove their progress. Under the leadership of Richard Hill, a Negro schoolteacher and son of Uncle John Hill, a favorite fiddler for wealthy white parties, Black Nashvillians designed and constructed the Negro Building, which included a segregated first aid station and other facilities for their use. Hill told African Americans that they were on trial. He said, the American people have spent no small amount in energy for our intellectual and moral training. Many are now asking, what have they amounted to? If they fail to exhibit their accomplishments, it would be our everlasting shame. Each college, university, and other acceptable African American each college, university, and other acceptable African American organization in the city enjoyed a special day for its segregated exhibits. The managers also set aside June 5th, 1897 as Negro Day to enjoy the fair, to enjoy the entire fair. From all over the state, blacks came to Nashville to visit the site, and schools, churches, and civic organizations marched in the parade. Both races kept segregated, attended affairs involving Republican President William McKinley, the governors of some 20 states, and Booker T. Washington's speech on Emancipation Day, September 22nd, 1897. The white Nashville press usually restricted coverage of African Americans to report of lynchings, uh, vignettes, and cartoons on the laziness and ignorance of blacks or articles on the misguided efforts of African Americans who challenged the color line. For the exposition, the papers enthusiastically reported on the Negro Building and African American activities. Leaders believed they had put their best foot forward at the fair and avoided everlasting shame. Nashville's class of well-off African Americans concentrated on making gains in business and the professions within the segregated Black community. Privately, like Booker T. Washington, they worked to remedy Black exclusion from politics and were finally somewhat successful in 1911 when a Black lawyer, Samuel P. Harris, was elected to the city council. He was the first African American elected since Napier's defeat in 1885. Poor and working class African Americans, such as Callie House and association members, interacted with this group of Blacks only in the course of business, such as in the incorporation of the organization. The National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association charter stated that the association would work to unite African Americans and Friends together in the cause. It made clear the dual mission of the organization. The association would collect petitions and lobby to pass the pension bill. However, mutual assistance was of equal importance. Local chapters would do whatever is necessary in the way of charity and benevolence by aiding of its members in distress and sickness, and in death, and in looking after the interests of all. Members contributed 10 cents monthly to finance their ambitious goals. Although chartered by primitive Baptists, the Church of Working Class Blacks, the first official association convention at which Miss House was elected assistant secretary, took place at the Gay Street Christian Church, a prominent disciples of Christian congregation. The church, founded in 1824 as the Negro Congregation of the White Vine Street Christian Church, trained and nurtured some of the most outstanding African American church, church brotherhood leaders, including Preston Taylor, who became a nationally admired Disciples of Christ leader. Taylor was was closely associated with James Napier and other well-off African Americans, Nashvillians. Taylor involved himself in every civic endeavor and enterprise in Nashville and the surrounding area, and he introduced Booker T. Washington at the 1897 Centennial Exposition. He also served as parade marshal on Negro Day. The Gay Street Church provided a quite respectable venue, giving the association credibility. The pastor serving the successor church today could find no records from this period, but suggest that the Gay Street became the venue for the association convention because of Preston Taylor's interest of every type of community involvement. Following the association's first post-charter convention from November 28th through December 1st, 1898, the newly elected Assistant Secretary, Callie House, reported to membership that they had proudly thanked local Republican leaders James C. Napier and Reverend Richard Henry Boyd for their attendance. Boyd's presence was important because he was the most successful Baptist minister, the founder of the National Baptist Publishing Board and financier of the local black newspapers, the Globe. The association officers knew that the presence of Napier and Boyd at either first official convention could signal the important political support for the pension cause. Napier's future father-in-law, for example, was John Mercer Langston, who had vocally opposed the pensions idea while in Congress. In the materials in the materials she sent to the state and local chapters, and after the convention, House reported that the convention had acknowledged both, both at the meeting and in its literature the role Vaughn had played by first suggesting pension legislation. She also candidly described a rift in the movement, blamed on Vaughn's attempt to anoint Hill, who the association did not deem any more likely than Vaughn to garner grassroots support. Although slanderous circulars and competing efforts had ensued, the association now asks that any existing organization affiliate with it to consolidate under one head. The delegates who went to Nashville for the meeting made clear their support of pension legislation and what they called the Buchan Bill, a measure introduced by Democratic Congressman Jeremiah Buchan of Kansas in March 1898. Hold on a second here. Let me show y'all this picture. 1 second. See if I can get y'all to see this picture. So that's that notice. Notice of the Ex-Slave Association 1898 convention at which Callie House was elected assistant secretary. All right. All right. So the Buchan Bill. All right. The bill gave ex-slaves homesteads of 40 acres. So the Buchan Bill gave ex-slaves homesteads of 40 acres for individuals and 160 acres for a family. The family would also receive initial capital from a legacy or commissary fund that included uncollected deceased soldiers' pay and pensions. This bill, which did not pass, reiterated the original promise of land to the freedmen that had remained unfulfilled. The Buchan Bill. The association announced opposition to a Senate bill designed to appropriate $100,000 for a national home for the aged and infirm old ex-slaves in Washington as out of line with its objectives. The appropriation would come from funds in the Treasury owed to deceased black soldiers but unpaid because wives and children were not aware they existed and did not apply or could not provide legal documentation of their relationship to the deceased. The bill's sponsor, Senator George Perkins, Republican of California, and chairman of the Committee on Education and Labor, stated that as of July 27, 1895, the funds amounted to 200 $230,018.84. And I'm going to show that. Yeah. So they amounted to $230,018.84 as of July 1885, July 27th. The funds, okay, even though the bill expressed a willingness to spend less than half that amount, a group of the very best and most influential colored people in this country had been asking senators and congressmen to introduce the bill since 1893. Their petition included leaders such as African Methodist Episcopal Church Bishop Alexander Walters, chairman of the Afro-American Council of Civil Rights Protests and Advocacy Groups. The four most prominent Washington, D.C. ministers, Francis Grimke of 15th Street Baptist Church, Walter Brooks of 19th Street Baptist Church, Albert Johnson of Metropolitan AME Church, and J.A. Taylor of Shiloh Baptist Church, and Calvin Chase, editor of the Washington Bee, one of the most important black newspapers. Those leaders had created a corporation and arranged to buy land to build the home. These men thought this appeal was more likely to receive support from Congress than any other proposals to help poor blacks. In the House debate on the bill, Congressman Ernest Roberts, Republican and from Maine, stated there is no question that the aged and colored people who once were slaves are more subject to destitution and require charitable aid more than any other class of people in the United States. Since the government did not establish charitable institutions, it should assist those who would. He asserted that in the District of Columbia, the only available public facility in the basement of the Children's Asylum on 8th Street could accommodate only 10 persons at a time. Therefore, it made sense to help blacks care for the needy and aged of their own race, using the funds that belonged to African American soldiers. Even though the convention liked the idea of the home, which to them seemed as unlikely to pass as the pension bill, it was opposed, according to Callie House's report to the members, because the small size of the proposed facility was grossly insufficient. In addition, the members believed it would block the passage of reparations for all time to come. Convention participants decided instead to continue their efforts to pass the Mason ex-slave pension bill. The tone of the congressional debate supported the ex-slave delegates' conclusion that the Home for Ex-Slaves bill would not pass. Representative Joseph Cannon, Republican representative from Illinois and chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, explained that in reality, no surplus funds existed from unclaimed pay and bounty for white or black soldiers because the Congress made appropriations only when needed. The bill therefore consisted of mere leather and brunella, mere deception, mere sticking in the bark. Hold on. Mere sticking in the bark, bum, okay, buncombe, so to speak. Bunk, basically. Buncombe, so to speak. This bill would do the manly and honest thing if it said there is hereby appropriated $100,000 to build this home. Also, he saw no reason to cut off the possibility of claims by black soldiers relatives in 1903 unless claims were also ended for the relatives of white soldiers. They might make claims later, he pointed out, that claims agents are writing all over the country. They are hunting up everybody to whom we owe anything, and uh, 3 times as many bodies to whom we do not owe anything. They are lively ducks. They might still identify claimants. Let me show you guys this picture. And this is Reverend Dudley McNary from Nashville. One of the charter incorporators was elected president of the Ex-Slave Association at the 1898 convention. The convention instructed him to go to Washington to lobby for the Mason bill. Excuse me. Yeah, the Mason bill. All right. So let's keep going here. We're almost done here, and just going to read one more page, and then we'll keep it moving. All right. Democratic Representative John Gaines from Tennessee objected. He predicted that the home would attract the poor from different states to the District of Columbia and become a burden, making the U.S. government a poorhouse. Georgia Democratic Representative Charles Bartlett pointed out that the funds did not come all together, possibly in very small part from colored soldiers of the District of Columbia. They came from various parts of the Union, but now the advocates wanted to use it for the benefit exclusively of persons residing in or near the city of Washington. Roberts answered that it would be located there, but for the people of the whole United States. Committees both, committees in both houses of Congress reported out the home bill, but it did not pass. Most of the convention, most of the convention time was spent on deciding how to move the pension legislation forward. In addition to electing Miss House Assistant Secretary, the convention delegates named Reverend Dudley McNary, one of the Charter Incorporated president, and Isaiah H. Dickerson, the general manager, to whom all communications should be addressed. At the end of the meeting, the delegates instructed McNary to go to Washington to lobby for the bill, which they persuaded Senator Edmund Press, Democrat of Alabama, to reintroduce. It repeated the provision of earlier bills, a pension of $15 per month and a bounty of $500 for each ex-slave 70 years and older. Those under 70 would receive $300 as a bounty and $12 per month until they reached the age of 70. Those less than 60 years old would receive a $100 bounty and $8 a month until they reached the age of 60. Those less than 50 years old would receive $4 a month. Then at age 50, $8 a month. Ex-slaves and those legally obligated to take care of those who could not care for themselves were eligible for the pensions. McNary expressed the hope that many ex-slaves organizations striving to secure the enactment of the Vaughn Bill, which is the Mason Bill, would affiliate with the association so as to consolidate under one head. The Constitution and bylaws and the report of the convention included photographs of the officers, including Callie House. The membership certificates boasted a picture of Senator Mason of Illinois and in one corner the words $500 bounty. The amount immediately payable, in addition to $15 per month to those 70 years or older if the bill passed. So this is where we're going to stop today. Just want to show you a couple of pictures and then we'll go. So this here is the early certificate of the Ex-Slave Association. Does not mention mutual assistance. Yeah. And this is the Constitution for the organization. The National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association, United States of America. This is Nashville, Tennessee. Okay, guys, thank you for watching and make sure you spread the message. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, go ahead and put them in the chat, put them down on the comment section. Peace.